One?
We might have crossed paths.
We probably crossed paths numerous times.
Of course, that's where...
I was in Eau Claire. I mean, I grew up in Eau Claire.
Yeah, and Nels went to Eau Claire.
A bunch of our friends went there.
A lot of our
so
friends
we'd go
from high
out there
school
every once in a while. Well, you go out there more than I did, but we'd go out there and go to the bar.
Yeah. I was engaged in 2002, so my Water Street days, like actually being out all the time on Water Street, were limited to about September 2001 to September 2002, probably.
Yeah, I'd say between 97 and 2001 or 2, I was probably in Eau Claire almost once a month just to visit Nels and everybody else that was going to school.
Yeah, I mean, I had the standard started at at Brothers.
Okay.
And then I'd go to the Nasty Habit. And then we'd go to the Pioneer. And then we'd end at Shenanigans. Might go to the Grand Illusion, right? Is that what it was called? Grand Illusion? The GI? Yeah, I think that's what it was called.
I don't remember that one.
You mentioned the Nasty Habit. I believe it was New Year's Eve in 1999. I could be off by a year or two, but I had my wallet stolen that night.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
He had his wallet stolen.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I had everything in it, Social Security card. It was a rough.
Yeah, that place doesn't exist anymore.
It does not. Okay.
Yeah, it was turned into the Dirty Pickle, I think it was, and then
the Dirty Pickle.
Yeah, and then it got shut down, and now I don't even think the building exists.
That's kind of like the what was that name of that bar in the Quad Cities when we decided to see Joe Mauer play? It wasn't the Wet Beaver. I kept calling it the Wet Beaver, but it was like the Furry Beaver or something like that. It was a terrible.
Well,
bar.
Now we're gonna get that explicit mark on the podcast.
We just went 40 minutes without it.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
It's innuendo. I don't know. It might not necessarily be a bad word per se, but
beavers are wet. Come on.
Yeah. Okay.
That's true. They are.
What was the name? I swear to God, it was the name of the bar.
Okay. You go to the zoo and you'll see wet beavers.
Exactly right.
I guess they usually.
So back to the second.
Back to this.
Right, let's stop it.
Okay, we've been trying. I think actually we're trying not to talk about the second goal.
It might be the fact. It might be true.
So let's get into it.
Okay, so as Dave pointed out, it was 62nd minute. So we managed to go 14 minutes, and for me, I don't really place blame on this goal. In my notes, I wrote down that it was a head scratcher for me because the reality is it was just a complete mess of poor defending, in my opinion. I initially wanted to blame Calvo. I did for probably the first 5 times watching it. And then all of a sudden, I realized that, no, this has a lot to do with how our formation was. Yeah. So if you watch the goal, the entire team, aside from whatever the offensive players are doing, was shifted all the way to our right. Mm-hmm. And we were so shifted that literally Boxall was almost on the right touchline.
Wow. And
then Calvo was probably mid-pitch, and Kelman was in the middle. And for us, our midfielders were all shifted up probably ahead of Kelman and Boxall. So we're all just shifted way far to the right. And what happened was Johnny Russell and Rubio were coming down really the center of the field, but it looked like it was practically the left wing. And there was no one on them. Yeah. Calvo was basically the only guy that could cover him. Jerry was coming up on the left side to meet Rubio, essentially. And so Jerry and Calvo were kind of on this island. And they beat the entire defense because everybody's so far over to the right.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden, it's just, where in the world is this challenge going to come from? Mm-hmm. Initially, like I said, I wanted to blame Calvo because he didn't do a very good job of challenging Russell once he got the ball.
Yeah.
But in the end, once Rubio got the ball, you had Jerry. He took a dive. He tried to get out, tried to get the block, and I think it went under his leg. And for me, I'd like to blame Calvo because it was very Calvo-esque
Yes.
To not challenge the guy.
Yes.
But it comes down to our personnel. It comes down to the fact that we don't have a number 6. If you have that anchor in the defensive midfield, you get guys to stay home.
Yep.
So let's say we have a number 6 and Schuler and Warner are our 2 midfielders, other midfielders. You've got Schuler's probably on the right, and Warner's probably on the left, and Warner's going to stay home on the left. So as Rubio and Russell come down, you're going to have your number 6, being that we were so shifted to the right, you're going to have that number 6 floating to the right side.
Yep.
But Warner is going to know he has his defensive midfielder there as an anchor for the defense, and he's going to stay to the left.
Exactly.
So you've got someone cutting off Rubio and Russell as they come down the field.
As they're making their runs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I mean, you might have more to add, but that's perfect. I actually, and we're going to talk about this later. We the Loons, you know, signed a new midfielder, and we'll talk about him later.
Yeah.
But one of my notes here was, why is that number 6 or that defensive midfielder so important? And you just answered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Because he's the anchor of the defense. I mean, a lot of people say that your anchor are the CBs. One of my favorite positions in soccer is the number 6 position. Because I've always loved the formations that really utilize a 6.
Yep.
And the reason for it is because he's kind of like that inside linebacker.
Yeah.
Who spies the QB or the running back.
Yep.
And he's just there to bust up the play.
Yeah.
And when you have that anchor in the defense, in the secondary in football, he's just there. Right? The number of times that an inside linebacker drops back into coverage and the quarterback doesn't see him and he gets picked.
Yeah, exactly right.
Or breaks up the pass.
Exactly right.
And that's the number 6. He's sitting there as the run of play comes up. He's kind of that anchor, and the defense kind of fits around him. Yep. And I think you have a number 6, that goal doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Because we were so shifted left. You have 3 free roaming midfielders in Schuler, Warner, and I think Ibsen was still out at that point. They just kind of roam with the ball, and everyone roamed to the right.
Roams, yep.
And you've got your 2. I mean, seriously, Russell is generally on the left side of the 3-man attack, and then Rubio's center. They had switched, but you have your two guys coming down, and there's absolutely no one. You're 2-on-2 basically.
Yeah,
and I guess so. Yeah, just a follow up. So if you call the number 6 position and you do a defensive midfielder, does that mean he's less involved, say, as a midfielder on the attacking side of the ball? Does he hang back further?
For me, I like a number 6 that hangs back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that doesn't necessarily happen.
Okay.
Most number 6s are kind of. They could be interchanged with the CB. They're generally not terribly skillful. They're pretty, or even really that quick. So they generally hang back a bit.
Yeah.
And I think in Adrian Heath's preferred formation, the 4-2-3-1, the 6 hangs back, and you've got that pivot guy that sits next to him, and the whole play kind of moves around him.
Sure.
And so, yeah, usually the 6 kind of hangs back.
So would 10 then be? Is 10? Would that typically be your attacking midfielder? Would you call him?
Yeah, because he's kind of the guy that makes the plays
for the forwards.
Yeah. So he kind of hangs back behind the forwards. Maybe sometimes is even considered a forward, and he just kind of moves the ball where it goes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, of everyone that listens that hates Chelsea, sorry. But that's Eden Hazard's a 10. He moves all over the place.
Sure.
But the play kind of goes through him.
Goes through. It's like a point guard in basketball is what it is. The play goes through them, and they're in charge of kind of feeding the ball to wherever it is, and that's that. That's kind of like what Pirlo used to do for Italy. Is the same type of deal. He was the point guard.
Yeah. So this goal, I don't think it had anything to do with communication.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it had really anything to do with soccer 101.
Yeah.
It was just you have guys out, specifically 3 midfielders, that are asked to do something they're not generally used to doing, and that's what happens.
All right. I can't talk about this game anymore. It's making me cry.
And maybe that's fine. We said we didn't want to spend too much time
and
talking
we
about
can
it.
use that as a segue into our new signing.
And
Yes.
I'll treat this almost as a side note. I just want to kind of run down the stats a little bit, and mainly because it was another 2-0 defeat.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because we haven't been able to get that goal. We haven't been able to just push across that edge.
It sucked.
Yeah, it did. But, because you look at it, and as far as shots, we had more shots. It was 16-12. Shots on target, we were 8-4. Possession was pretty close. It was 55-44 in favor of Sporting Kansas City. But just going down the line, you look at the stats, and you just wish it could have been closer. You hope, and it just on paper it should have been a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then the only other stat that kind of jumps out, and we probably should talk about, is the yellow cards. 0 for SKC and 2 for us, Boxall and Calvo.
We need to talk about the yellow cards because that flows into next. This week. Well, when do they play? Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, the 12th. Yeah.
So they come
a week from Wednesday.
A week from Wednesday. Yeah. So we need to talk about that because that flows into that game. We're not going to have Calvo because of his yellow card
accumulation,
yep. And we're not going to have who's the other one?
Boxall for the same reason.
Right. And technically, we may not have Calvo for his call up.
Well, and we were talking about this before the podcast,
which means the United might be missing him for two games. More games.
Exactly right.
It depends on how MLS decides to allow Minnesota to eat.
Okay. Which we can't afford.
Now you say decides. Is that a decision they can make on a case by case basis? Because you'd like to think they'd have a hard set rule. Okay, if you get an international call up, then that yellow card accumulation, or even 2 yellow cards in a game.
I would say that's pretty typical, except the fact that it's Major League Soccer.
Yeah,
and they like to adjust rules as they see fit.
Is Commissioner Garber listening to this podcast?
I would bet the Don does not listen to this podcast.
Well, that's too bad, because I'm going to tell you right now.
Well, let's not assume he doesn't.
Commissioner, we need Calvo in one of those games, so please.
Please, for the love of God.
Please, give us some hope.
All right. I got and little game, as far as I've said it many times, the Audi index is growing on me. Just for a game for us, I want each of you to guess who do you think was the highest player for the Loons as far as the Audi index is concerned. And we don't need to go into details, but just
so for SKC?
Against SKC, what Loon player
is the best?
Was the highest?
Highest Audi rate.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Calvo.
Okay. Kalman. Okay, I might have gone Ibsen, but it's because it surprised me. It was Angelo Rodriguez at not very good. We're talking.
Good God, really?
425 was the highest rated.
425,
which is fairly low on that scale, but that was our highest rated player.
On that.
Kalman was okay at 336, and Calvo was not too low at 287. They were kind of in the middle of the pack. Just a little note from that index: Bobby Shuttleworth, we talked about earlier, was only at a 56. He's usually much higher.
Oh, yes, he is.
So what was Angelo's again?
Angelo was 425.
And Calvo's was what?
Calvo was 287.
So had Calvo not had the yellow, he would have been higher than Rodriguez.
Yes. Yeah. That might have been enough to knock him down, because that's a significant negative.
Yeah, I think it's like 150 points.
Yeah. I forgot about the yellow when I was saying Calvo. Shoot.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I picked Kelman, because he was the only center back that didn't.
Yeah, there you go. That's good times. So, going into this next game, then, we're not going to have Calvo. We're not going to have Boxall. Who knows about Darwin?
Right.
And it doesn't sound... We aren't going to have Romario Ibarra.
Romario will not... Ibarra Jr. will not be in because he got called up to his national team.
Which is fantastic.
Which is great. It's great.
I mean, it's really great. And what's sad about this is the fact that I think DC would have been the game we would have seen